Good morning, everyone, and what a great morning it is. First and foremost, happy Veterans Day to my fellow veterans out there on this November 11th. Hope you have a great day. But it is a great day for Ukraine, and it's just a great day for me to be able to say I told you so to some particularly frustrating, like absolutist Russian supporters. Like, they don't care what happens, Russia's always right. Ukraine and the US are always wrong. Russia is the greatest world power to ever live. And they said that this was absolutely a trap. They were drawing the Ukrainians in. So starting with what we see now, this is where we left off yesterday. This was like around noon, I think, is where I left off yesterday. Noon Mountain Time. So like 2 p.m. Eastern is where this was left off yesterday in the video I made. So kind of just setting the conditions of what you can see here. There's still, as of yesterday, there was still Russian command posts, and there was a defensive barrier set up by the Russians there, and then there was a defensive barrier set by the Russians there. Now, when you see a U formation like this, that is absolutely a defensive position so that units can exfil. They are defending any kind of attacks. They're creating a barrier, so they are trying to move downward. And you could see this actually, this U shape. If you ever look at Battle of Gettysburg, they create this kind of U-shaped door almost, where it's like the Ninth Maine. If you ever see the part where Jeff Daniels in the movie fixed bayonets, etc., they were defending from the Confederate push. The difference is the Union won in that situation, and they were on the defensive, whereas here the Russians on the defensive are losing. And I'll show you here in a bit what I mean. So obviously yesterday I was talking about how the Ukrainians were concerned, rightfully so, that this could be some sort of trap. So they were using a tactic to punch through here if needed to. They provided an overwhelming force to try and punch through, but I mean, fortunately, it doesn't seem to have been needed. So we'll move on to what happened over the next. This is a kind of over the next 18 to 24 hours, what has changed on the battlefield. So keep an eye, and remember, I had these command posts are Russian command posts. So moving up. See how, remember I told you the Ukrainians were using a punch? Did you see right there? Ukrainian punch through right there. That's what the Ukrainians were doing. So let me back it up and show you again. That punch through. Exactly what I said they were doing. And they did it. Not trying to toot my own horn, but I'm kind of good at this. Anyways, going back to the other side here. At this point, what you see from the Russian forces is this line that was right here has completely evacuated. You can see the command post has been moved. It's out of there. So the Russians have essentially vacated this region. You can see the command post here has been vacated from what was up here. And as of the map right now, or as of the map at this moment in time, which was obviously about 12 hours ago or so, the Russians, at least the Russian brigade commands, the 7 or so brigades, officially had evacuated to the east of the Dnipro River here. All of the 4 or so brigades, there's like roughly 4 or 5 brigades that were in defense over here, have also, excuse me, also moved to, and I'm not trying to draw inappropriate pictures here, but have also exited. So the major commands have left the battlefield to retreat to the east of the Dnipro River. And for those of you that don't know, this is the Dnipro River right here. Moving on. Big chunk. This is the full withdrawal. At this point, all Russian troops that haven't switched to civilian clothes or haven't officially left are now stuck in Russia at this point. The major brigades all have exited at this point. This is about 6 hours ago. Like I said, all Russian command forces, all Russian forces officially have exited the area. The only thing left is just maybe some small forces that are in these regions. And then finally, we cut to, not necessarily finally, still seeing that punch. Ukraine not playing around, and that punch through, just to continue to make sure, again, to make sure that this wasn't actually a trap and they're not being drawn in, and that still, you can see that formation still showing, pointed straight at Kherson. But it was not largely unnecessary because it was not a trap. As I've said before, it wasn't a trap. And as of 2 hours ago, the city of Kherson has been liberated by the Ukrainians. The Russian forces have retreated to the eastern bank of the Dnipro River. This is where the Russian formations are as of right now. They have formed essentially a couple of lines here. The 6 or 7 or so brigades that came from here retreated and have set up defensive positions here. The 4 or 5 brigades that were set up over here have retreated and currently are setting up defensive positions here. And that's where we are at right now. So Kherson has been liberated. There's been videos of them putting Ukrainian flags on buildings in Kherson, and I'll share some of those videos later. But it begs a question on what's next. What's going on? What's next to happen? Because this was a major victory. This is a mammoth victory for the Ukrainians to take back Kherson. Kherson was the only major regional city Russia had taken, and the Ukrainian armed forces have taken it back in less than a year. Absolutely outstanding. And it's interesting because Mark Milley, let me clear this out. Mark Milley, who is a general in the U.S. military, says this war will now stagnate into trench warfare. I don't necessarily disagree, but I disagree with the way ahead he is saying. Any push across this river by Ukraine in the near term is very dangerous for Ukraine. It's very stupid, actually. I'm not saying they won't eventually, but right now, consolidating their wins, resupplying, refitting, and investigating mammoth war crimes in Kherson likely is going to be the next phase. However, General Milley cites World War I as the reason to potentially discuss a ceasefire. And that doesn't make any sense to me, because that was a century ago, and we've gotten a century's worth of advances made on the battlefield. And Ukraine has the initiative in securing this victory in Kherson. And the coming months really are a big opportunity for Ukraine to expand on these gains, prevent Russia from consolidating the defenses. And I'll zoom out to the broader picture. Now, again, I don't think Ukraine is going to pursue, like I said, into this portion on an eventual push to what would be Crimea. But eventually Ukraine will. I just don't think that's their next step. I think the next phase that makes the most sense because of terrain is going to be potentially somewhere along this front right here. Trying to push potentially in towards Mariupol, which is right here, trying to push towards Mariupol, maybe to split this quote-unquote land bridge that Russia holds right here, to eliminate any potential resupply through this region into Crimea, which would be a major tactical victory for them as well. Now, looking further, other areas include potentially looking at Severodonetsk, which is right here. Let me zoom out here. Looking at Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, which is right here. But in the winter months, this is more kind of crummy terrain than this over here. So, but there's less Russian resistance here. So Ukraine could push this way and then sweep downward, or they could just push through here and try to cleave Mariupol and potentially even Melitopol off, isolating Crimea from the rest of Russia. And we've seen that it's difficult for Russia to resupply by sea because of land-based anti-naval forces and such. So I don't think a wintertime ceasefire is in the cards for anyone. That benefits only Russia, not Ukraine. And Russia's equipment is already having problems, and the Ukrainians have the morale, the strength, and the readiness to do so. So I think this fight will continue through the winter.